You open up your laptop and it's time to check the overnight data pipelines. You open up a browser, you log in and check the pipelines. You open up another tab, you log in again, different environment, same thing. 12 environments, dev production, that's 24 environments every single morning. My colleague Jan got tired of that, so he built a terminal user interface called Flowrs that allows him to manage all of his environments at once, from his keyboard. No mouse, no browser, no nonsense. And in this episode, Jan is going to show us how that works and how you can build something like this yourself in Rust. I am Johnny, knowledge lead here at Data Minded, and welcome to Technology Explorations. Hi everyone. Today we'll have a look at text user interfaces or terminal user interfaces. For that, I've invited Jan. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you, Johnny.
Could you tell us a bit more about yourself and your role at Data Minded?
I'm working here at Data Minded as a data engineer. I'm a team lead currently at one of our clients, and I'm also heading our academy.
Okay, Jan, so you have been building a terminal user interface. Maybe show us what you built.
Sure. I'm in my terminal, and in my case, the TUI is called Flowrs, and you can start Flowrs by just typing Flowrs. The name Flowrs is a pun on Apache Airflow, flow flowers. And because it is written in Rust, a lot of Rust projects, they have this RS suffix. So that's where the name comes from, Flowrs.
And so for our viewers, Airflow is an orchestrator for data engineers. Could we maybe have a look at what the UI looks like normally?
Sure. So this is the Airflow UI. And in Airflow, you have your DAGs, your directed acyclic graphs, which represent your workflow, your data pipelines, and you can inspect them and see how they are running, what they are doing. So here you have an overview of all of your DAG runs. Each vertical line is a DAG run. Each square here is a task in your pipeline. You can also visualize it as this DAG, as this directed acyclic graph of all these operations that will get scheduled by Airflow. And so Airflow is basically the babysitter of these DAGs, of these pipelines. And as you can already see, to navigate in this UI, first of all, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that I can click. There's a lot of different buttons and tabs. What you've now seen was one Airflow environment, one Airflow instance, and that's still manageable if you need to navigate through the DAGs and through all of the pipelines to see after a night of batch runs, which pipelines have failed, where do you need to take action. But if you have 10 or tens of these environments, it quite quickly becomes a hassle to do this through the UI by just clicking. And I got sick and tired of doing that, and that's why I built the TUI.
Yeah, so you hate clicking around and jumping across all these environments because it takes a lot of time.
Exactly.
And as a data engineer, you manage multiple ones of these. Like in this case, we see 12 environments. And you have a development, production, you need to check all of them. So that would require 12 tabs being open. And then even in those environments, you manage multiple DAGs.
Yeah.
Lots of work.
Lots of clicking, lots of digging deeper to figure out what happened. And I wanted to make this easier.
Yeah, so you built your own terminal user interface called Flowrs to navigate it. So could you show us around a bit in the terminal user interface on how you use it?
Yeah, sure. So let's drill down on an environment. So when you go into an environment, you have, first of all, the list of DAGs. So these are your pipelines, your workflows. And then you can navigate through the DAGs just using your keyboard. You can use Vim key bindings, so meaning J is going down, K is going up. You can also jump to the top of the table by using GG, or you can go to the bottom with capital G. And you can also filter if you just quickly want to find a DAG that you're interested in by using the / command, and then you see a filter popping up at the bottom, and then you can look for your favorite DAG. And in my case, I want to have a look at this DAG. If you then select the DAG, you get to see all of the DAG runs of the DAG. So a DAG run is an instantiation of a DAG, and DAG is this concept of a workflow or pipeline. DAG run is a run of this pipeline. You get some information about this DAG. When did it run? How long did it take? There's a line gauge to show how long it took in comparison to other DAG runs. And if you then drill down, you can see all of the individual tasks of your DAG run to see how long did they take, did they run successfully. And then even at the run or the task level, you can drill down and see all of the logs of that specific run.
I also see a follow mode here, so you would be able to have a trail and follow along when the pod is running in this case, or the task is running.
Exactly. So it basically continuously pulls for new logs, and then it will follow along. So you don't have to do anything.
While you did the drill down, I saw these stops every time you went a bit deeper and you go from the top level where you have all your instances to your DAGs, to the runs, to the tasks, to the logs. How do you effectively use this in your day-to-day?
In my case, what I typically do, there's a few workflows, but we typically get alerted of important pipelines when they fail. And this is happening in our alerting system. It's PagerDuty. And then I just look at the name of the DAG in the alert, and I navigate to the right environment, and I start searching for that DAG to see it failed. And then I drill down to see what failed, why did it fail. And as I mentioned before, you get the application logs for a failed task instance, so I can easily figure out what went wrong and try to fix it.
Yeah, your trigger is an error from a pipeline. You get an alert, there's something wrong, and this allows you to immediately dive deep into that error without opening a browser, opening the right environment. So it saves you a bit of time, I guess.
Yeah, it does. I can also, if I don't know which tag it is, here there's a bunch of successful tasks, but I know that there's also a couple of failed ones. And then I can also filter on the state. You also see, hopefully, that there's like this autocomplete. It will also cycle. If I start typing failed, it already knows. And then I just have an overview of the failed tasks of my tag run in this case. And then I can have a look at the logs and see, okay, here's a DBT job is running and one of the tests actually failed.
Yeah. And also these things like these autocomplete, you built that yourself in this UI.
Yeah. The autocomplete is it's basically a state machine. It generates the possible attributes of a DAG run or of a task that you can filter on.
Very nice. I think this looks quite slick, actually, this UI. Anything else, Jan, you'd like to show?
Actually, yes, on the UI side, Johnny, I recently added something based on a request of a user. So we all know, and you also know, that any self-respecting developer uses a dark mode terminal, but there are some people that have maybe some color issues, color blindness, and they sometimes prefer a light mode terminal. So when you would open Flowrs in a light mode terminal, it looks at your terminal, tries to figure out, are you in a light mode terminal or in a dark mode terminal?
How does that even work? Because terminals, do they pass on this information in the environment?
Well, I cannot give you the full details because I used a dependency to do this. There's a crate called Terminal Color Saurus, and I like the name already, but that does it for you. And if you look at the README of the project, it seems like it's people really knowing what they're doing and really knowing terminals inside out, looking at specific escape sequences and C codes. It just works in my case. It correctly can figure out that this is a light mode terminal.
So the extra feature is light mode, where we used to see dark modes. You have a light mode as a new feature.
Exactly. And not only light mode, you can also, because of course we have to over-engineer everything, you can also select these cappuccino themes, like latte, frappe, macchiato. And they each have a slightly different color scheme, and you can also enable those. Flowrs supports both Airflow v2 and v3, which is something that was quite useful for us because we have many of these environments and we were migrating these environments from v2 to v3, but we still wanted to manage our DAGs in the same way, right? We still wanted to navigate through our DAGs, find the failed task instances, and it kind of looks the same for both v2 and v3 Airflow.
So you provide more UI stability than Airflow itself at this point.
Yes, but also less features. In the Airflow UI, apparently now you can play Doom. That's something you cannot do with Flowrs. Not yet, at least. I wanted to show this escape hatch. Maybe not everything you want is visible within Flowrs. So you can press O on any object, on a DAG run, or on a task instance, and it will open the Airflow UI of that environment.
You can easily, if you need more features or more graphical features, you can easily dive in. Nice.
If you press V, it shows you the code of the DAG. One thing I would like to show, which I think is quite cool, is if you have a bunch of failed DAGs, for example, and you want to all mark them as successful, you typically would do this if there's nothing really actionable about your failed DAG. Maybe your DAG has failed because there was a timeout or something, but you know that it's fixed now, and so you just want to mark your DAG as successful. And you can press Shift V, you go into visual mode, just like in Tim. You can navigate, and that basically selects a bunch of these, in this case, DAG runs. And you can then press the M button to mark them as success failed. I want to mark them as successful.
So in terms of managing such a large workload or multiple environments, this is a lot faster than going through the UI. I see TUIs popping up everywhere. Where is this coming from?
It's a good question. Terminal user interfaces were the OG interfaces of our computers, right? You used to have only a terminal and some text on it. This is a VT100, one of the first daily typewriters. That's what you got, a black screen and some text. And that used to be more than enough for a lot of use cases. Here you also have an example of MS-DOS.
Yeah.
Also the first games. Yeah, I really like this kind of trivia. The first games were also just text-based games. And I think as a developer, yeah, you kind of like working in a terminal. You feel efficient, you feel fast. If you have to navigate through a file system, I think most developers would say they prefer doing that than clicking around. You have this element of speed, of being efficient. It's a lot less convoluted and a lot less busy than the typical web UI. Although, of course, if people properly design web UIs, they can also be simple and focused.
Yeah.
And then there's also these retro aesthetics. It's more of a personal thing, but I like it.
And it's also available on many systems, right?
Yeah.
Like there's always like a bash terminal available that you can use.
Indeed. Where I also think it shines is for these kind of applications where you have a big surface. And like Airflow is a good example. You have a lot of things you can do with Airflow, with the UI. There's also an Airflow CLI, which is also quite a big CLI. You can do a lot of things.
What is then the difference between CLIs and TUIs, according to you? When would you opt for each of them?
A very good question. And also it can be tied to like this new wave of agentic AI and agents doing things for us. A TUI is a very visual thing, right? We humans are very visual creatures, right? And we easily spot small changes in a visual thing. Reading a bunch of text, which is typically what comes out of a shell command, that takes time for us. We don't read that fast. Now, agents do read very fast, right? So you have all of these agent skills, and a lot of agent skills wrap around the CLI. They use CLIs. And I really think that's a beautiful marriage between the two. Agents can read super fast. The CLIs just give tags back. But as a human, you are, I think, more efficient by just having something visual. In the case of Airflow, it's way easier to spot one red dot on your screen to show that something has failed, and then read the output of one CLI command.
Yeah, that's true. And so your Flowrs TUI, does it mean it's not as suited for agents to use?
Yeah, maybe it could be used. I'm not sure if it just will be very efficient.
And so what is then the reason you designed Flowrs? Because now we have agents, they can talk to CLIs. You could just ask a question. Do you still have the need for a speed up that you cannot achieve with agents?
Well, first of all, I started developing Flowrs before there were agents, and it was born out of frustration with having to click in the UI and also curiosity. I like to know how things tick. Like, how does a TUI actually work? What does it do? So I started building this before the whole agentic revolution. Are agents already replacing Flowrs in my day-to-day workflow? Not yet, but I also don't really have a good reason or argumentation of why they couldn't.
But I think you're still faster when doing it on your keyboard, because if you know your Flowrs, then you can easily jump into things that you know. So it's like second nature to you, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you still win of the AI in this case.
Still out competing the bots.
Yes,
that's true. But if cost is not of a concern, because in the end, you can indeed tell an agent, hey, here's the Airflow CLI, figure it out. And it might take half an hour to figure it out and burn a bunch of tokens to do it. That might be a trade-off you're willing to make.
How do you build such a system? Where do you start?
Yeah, so when I started building Flowrs, I started first looking for frameworks that people are using to build these TUIs. I quickly found these three. You have Bubble Tea, Textual, and Ratatui, and each are written in a different language, which is also quite nice if you're very familiar with a specific language. With a colleague, we experimented a bit with Bubble Tea. It's written in Go. It's very easy to use. It's very elegant as well. You also, by default, it gets a nice UI if you just take the default templates of bubble tea. But I didn't choose bubble tea. I thought, well, let's do something more challenging. And I wanted it also to improve my Rust knowledge. So that's why I went with Ratatui. Textual, I think it's also quite good, despite Python having this connotation of not being a very performant language. I think textual UIs can be also very interactive and very performant.
And what is the reason for you that you're so hyped about Rust? I hear this a lot. I haven't looked into Rust myself. It's still somewhere on the backlog for me.
I think one of the main reasons is that it's fun to get hyped about stuff. In the end, it's just a programming language. They're all Turing complete, but it's fun to get hyped about things.
Yeah.
And the other reason is that I like the expressiveness of the type system. I come from a scientific background, physics and mathematics, and I always liked the rigidity of proofs of logic. And then with Python, it's kind of the opposite. You can write a lot of things and nobody will complain. And at some point they might crash and burn in production and you will look at the wreckage and then see, okay, that went wrong. I need to fix this in this way. With Rust, you have kind of the opposite. You are developing your application and for the first, in my case, it was many days, the damn thing doesn't even compile. Some people say the compiler shouts at you. I now look at it as the compiler teaches you why what you wrote doesn't make sense, is not fault tolerant, has some issues with it. So I like the expressiveness of the type system and the guarantees that it provides.
Okay. So it's a static compiled language, I assume.
Exactly.
You get a lot more safety.
Yeah. And one of the selling points, the tagline is always blazingly fast. You could do a benchmark with some other TUIs and you would probably find indeed that it's faster. But all right. So you have these different frameworks, but under the hood, they're all actually quite similar. In the end, it's just one big event loop. And it just does three different things. It listens for input events when you press a key on your keyboard or you get a response from an API call. And then based on the event, it typically updates some state. And then after the state has been updated, there's a render phase and you display them on the screen. And for the rendering phase, you often have built-in widgets like a table, a bar graph, and that just repeats in an infinite loop. Yeah. So most of these frameworks give you either built-in widgets that you can easily configure yourself, or you can create your own widgets, and they typically have a few functions that you need to implement. So an example of some of these widgets, this is like the demo or the showcase project of Ratatui. So you can create these kind of tabs with it. You can have maps. You can have spark lines, gauges, whatever you want.
This is really good for in the movies to put on screen and show something really cool is happening, right?
Exactly. This is this basic gist of it. You have your application, which is basically a loop, which first draws or renders to the terminal, and then it starts processing events, see if something has changed. In this case, the only thing that can happen is you press a key and then it will break, and then basically your app will shut down. But what you would do is here put all of the logic, like if people press the J key or the down key, that means you have to go to the next item in a table.
Yeah.
If there's a tick event, like you have this clock ticking every 200 milliseconds, for every 2000 milliseconds, make an API call to the Airflow REST API to get the latest DAGs. You update your state with that, and then the next loop starts, basically terminal.draw, and it will render. Actually, my main takeaway message is go forth and multi-apply. It's very easy to build your own TUI and to wrap around it.
And how long were you working on this?
That's a good question. In the beginning, of course, I didn't know the language, so I had to learn Rust. I made a lot of stupid rookie mistakes. So I think it took me on and off about a year to get like a first UI where I could just see the DAGs and the DAG runs into task instances. But then this filtering, for example, with the state machine, this theming stuff, that became a lot easier because I feel comfortable with the language and we have agents to help us.
Okay, nice. And so people can actually use this, right? Can they brew install Flowrs, or how does that work?
Actually, that's also a nice thing. There was a contribution from somebody from the community last week, and they added it to the brew core tabs. So now anybody can just brew install Flowrs. So when you open Flowrs for the first time, you don't see that much, right? Because Flowrs works with Airflow instances, and you need to tell Flowrs where to find those Airflow instances. Airflow is an open source project, which means you can just host it yourself. You can basically deploy it on any cloud environment, on AWS, for example, with some EC2 machines. But you also have a bunch of managed services. So actually, before you would even open Flowrs, you would do something like Flowrs config enable -m for managed service, and then you can type a managed service. There are a bunch of managed services, as I already mentioned. There's Conveyor, which is Datamine its own managed Airflow offering, but you also have MWAA, which is managed workflows for Apache Airflow on the AWS cloud. You have Google Cloud Composer. You have Astronomer, which we all know now because of the CEO news story.
And so you fill in the type of the managed service that you have, and then it generates a config for you.
Exactly. So you enable it. In this case, it was already enabled, and there is a config file. If it doesn't exist, it will get created, and it basically contains some configuration that the TUI manages for you. And then you can start Flowrs, and it will actually find all of the Airflow environments. If you don't want to use a managed service, you just have your own Airflow instance, you can also just provide a host name and credentials if you use basic authentication, like a username and a password, or OAuth2 with the JWT token. Those are all also valid options.
Also, in this case, you have Conveyor, but Conveyor manages multiple of these environments, so it auto-discovers even the environments that you have.
Indeed.
Because that depends on the managed service, right?
Exactly. And on MWAA, so on Amazon, it also auto-discovers the environments that you have within your region. On GCP, you can also select a region and a GCP project, and it will also auto-discover the Composer environments that you have available.
Could you show the Git repo, maybe?
Sure. So here's a repo.
Oh, wow. You have 143 stars.
Exactly. And of course, a self-start. So this already existed since 2023, and I was mainly using it myself. And I was constantly poking some colleagues like, hey, have you tried Flowrs already? I know that you have to work with 10 Airflow environments. Maybe you want to try Flowrs. And then at some point, I got an email mentioning like, hey, your TUI is the TUI of the week. And then also the maintainer of the Ratatui project also shared it on his LinkedIn, I think. And then also some more people found it. And I recently posted it in the Apache Airflow community Slack. There's some community interaction now, which I actually like. It's also a first for me. I built some stuff, but usually just for myself.
What did you learn about this whole TUI process?
I learned that I really like Rust as a programming language. I also learned that it's fun to just sometimes take a peek under the cover. We all use these applications. Figuring out how they tick is a fun and rewarding experience on its own. I've also learned that agentic AI, especially the last couple of months, can really speed up the frequency at which you can push out new features. And I also learned that you sometimes also need to push people. Like you have to be the annoying marketeer in order for people to start using your app. Even if you think it's amazing. I mean, I use it on a daily basis. I like using it. Just building it and making it public on GitHub, that doesn't result in people finding it and actually using it.
You have to push it out and go after your audience yourself a bit.
Indeed.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it's a very nice tool you showed us, Jan. So thanks a lot for sharing what TUIs are, how you build them, and put them in the market. If you're using Airflow, check out the tool of Jan. We'll share the link in the description and in the comments. So Jan, thanks a lot for explaining this. Thank you everybody for watching. Check out Jan's tool, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.